Hey y'all, it's Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle Housing Market Watch for January 2nd, 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. We are finally in the year 2024, and as we've been talking about over the past few months, I think 2024 is going to be a year of a little bit of a rebound in the Seattle housing market, and I would guess in a lot of other markets across the country. 2023 was quite the up and down roller coaster year here in Seattle. We had rates on a roller coaster. We had a relatively competitive spring housing market, which is normal, but maybe unexpected last year. And I would say mainly due to the low inventory or lack of homes coming on the market. But as we head into 2024, we find ourselves in a really low inventory environment again, meaning there just aren't a lot of houses for sale. We find ourselves in a place where there's a little bit more hope in the housing market, I would say, as rates have remained about the same as they were at the same time last year. I mean, even looking at this week's rates as of today on Mortgage News Daily, 6.72%. If we look at last week, we were at 6.61, so up a little bit from last week. Year over year, 6.41 last year, heading into the new year or starting 2023. So slightly up from last year. But last year, we were thinking we were going to see rates keep climbing, which we did. This year, the Fed has announced that they are going to be bringing down rates at least 3 times, and who knows if they'll actually do that. But I think that also gives hope that mortgage rates would likely drop here for homes as we continue into 2024. So I think the sentiment is a little bit different heading into the new year. Now, let's talk about the market. And in Seattle, there's usually not a lot of activity over the holidays, and we see that same trend. This last week, we had 69 listings come on the market in King and Snohomish County. That's the 2 largest counties in the Seattle area. Again, 69 listings versus 82 last week. Last year, we had 186 the same week. I will say we also filmed this video on 1/4 last year, so a couple days of time. So we may see a couple listings come on the market here in the coming days that would bump that number up. I think the back on market number, we had 34 come on the market, again, which most likely would have been canceled listings. I couldn't imagine people just deciding to put their house on during the New Year week. But we also have a lot of expired listings. We had 111 expired listings. I would guess that a lot of those listings are going to be coming on the market this week or in the coming weeks. I also think that some of those canceled, we only had 34 canceled listings versus 74 last year, people canceling during the last week of the year. I would think that those are also going to be coming back on the market. So as we head into the 2024 housing market here in Seattle, we find ourselves with relatively strong activity. We had 308 closed listings this last week of the month. Last year we had 423 though. So we've talked about this all year. There's just been less happening. But week over week, we had an increase slightly from the previous week. Pending sales were down for the holiday week. Again, relatively normal from 385 to 305. Last year, we had 393. Same trend, right? Less happening. But we still find ourselves looking at some of the data for the month. Again, I'm going to share that next week when we look at the monthly updates. But just a little sneak peek, we're right at a month of supply heading into the new year, which is low. That's when things usually are crazy in the springtime. My prediction video, I'm going to film that next week. So if you're following along on YouTube or with the podcast, you're going to get to see what my thoughts are in a little bit more depth next week. I'm waiting for some of the most recent data to be updated as we're just coming out of the holidays, and sometimes agents are taking time off. So I'm gonna make sure I get you the most accurate data. But as we're looking towards the new year, I think we're going to see a really competitive spring housing market here in the Seattle area. And the biggest indicators, I think, number one, we're in a really low inventory environment, and that's really just not going to change as we head into the spring. There are going to be more listings coming on the market for sure, but there's not going to be enough to satisfy all the demand. So we're going to find ourselves in multiple offer situations. And then I also think with the amount of people that have been starting those conversations up again, with me, with other agents that I know, there are people waiting to list, there are people waiting to buy. Now we're hitting that spot. So I would think that January and February and March, as we're kind of heading towards the spring, we're going to see a lot more activity in the housing market. I would expect to see a little bit more of a normal amount of activity for the spring too. So we'll look at year over year numbers in the spring, and I would guess those would start to be up year over year versus down year over year when it comes to amount of listings and amount of solds and amount of pending sales. I also think that we'll see the price year over year be up. Again, stay tuned for next week's update when we look at the final month of 2023's data and also make predictions for 2024 in the Seattle housing market. I'm so grateful that you've been following along with these updates. If you're new to the Seattle Housing Market Watch, please consider subscribing and following along on a regular basis. And if I can bring any value to your real estate situation, please feel free to reach out. And then one more thing I want to mention. I started a podcast with a good friend and mortgage lender a few months back called Hello Seattle. And this podcast is specifically geared towards people that are new to the Seattle area and or considering moving to the Seattle area. And I think that this podcast, if you're somebody maybe not in the Seattle area or new to the area, I think you'll find a lot of value following along with that podcast as well. It's not just for real estate content specifically, but it's more geared towards what it's like to be in Seattle specifically and some of the surrounding areas. So if you think that that would benefit you in any way, please check that out, and you can find it on any different podcast platform.